how do you, as an attorney, let's say this does get taken up and the lower court says, yeah, you can challenge this. And let's say we do get a death determination change from suicide to either homicide or to undetermined. There was no investigation. Nobody take a look at these knives. Nobody, no fingerprints, nothing. I mean, the story that basically was told was that the fiance broke open the door and then found her like this, and a really weird 911 call to go along with it. If you've ever listened to it, it's like crazy. And that's where they basically said, no, we don't need to do investigation. He said the door was locked from the inside. Case closed. And if you actually look at the door, the pictures of it, it does not look like the chain lock was broken. It would be ripped off the door. There's so many ways the thing would be damaged, and it was not. So that story doesn't even add up a whole lot. And I'm not saying the fiance did it. Let me be clear on that. But I'm saying that he'd be the first person that would be looked at. He'd be the first person you'd be questioning, at the very least, to get some baseline of what the hell's going on in this world, to maybe figure out who did this if it's not him. But none of that was ever done. So all these years later, how do you go about investigating a case like this and determining who to go after?
The Greenbergs are certainly at a disadvantage here, and obviously police have a tough job. There are funding issues. There are caseload burdens that can become oppressive. And so what happens is when they get in there, they kind of make a call and go with it. But really, best practice is when there's a suspicious death, even if they think it's a suicide. They still need to do their due diligence, collect evidence, have it probably have it analyzed, investigate the scene, do witness interviews, and it sounds like not enough of that was done to preserve the Greenbergs' ability to pursue this so many years later. Now that none of that, or a lot of that stuff is not there, the Greenbergs are going to be handcuffed in terms of trying to get justice.
Can you go after somebody all these years later? I mean, it's murder. I know you technically can. There's not a statute of limitations on that. But how do you, again, with no evidence other than a really weird 911 call, which doesn't really prove a whole lot, other than people can act weird sometimes on 911 calls. But there's no DNA evidence. All that stuff is gone. So all you're going to really have is circumstantial things, and even a lot of that's not, there's not a lot of there that was even preserved, other than just looks really, really bad for one person who's never been charged with anything.
Totally, and it's difficult because they haven't even identified who they think absolutely did this. Now, there's
Mhm.
suspicions for a number of people, like you mentioned,
Sure.
but uh, but where we're at is something really horrible happened, and the police may have gotten it wrong. But now what? How do we try to identify what happened all these years before without that evidence? It's going to be so difficult. And then also on the civil side, for the family pursuing any kind of compensation, even though there's no statute of limitations for criminal murder, there is often for wrongful death and pursuing civil damages.
Mhm.
And the Greenbergs may be SOL on that front.
Yeah. Let's play it from the other direction too. Let's say you're the person who is the person of interest in this, and suddenly all this changes, and they're going to open an investigation into this. Is this an easy one to defend? If you're the attorney for the individual that's of interest?
Well, what it sounds like is there are injustices all around, including for a person who could be a person of interest in this. Because if there was not thorough investigation done at the beginning, sometimes investigation reveals incriminating stuff. Sometimes it reveals what's called exculpatory stuff,
Sure.
or stuff that tends to show that the person of interest didn't do it. But if that investigation was not completed, then the accused does not cannot avail themselves of any evidence from the investigation that may have been exculpatory because no such investigation was completed.
What about in that kind of line of succession of how things went? I mean, there are things that can be looked at of who talked to who. Why did this change from homicide to suicide? Um, who cleaned up the evidence that quickly? Who cleaned the whole thing up? We know who did those things. That's factual. That's the fiance's family. Um, would that be looked at? I mean, could those actions itself be evidence in this case of, are you trying to cover something up here, or just what's the reason? Like this, give us a reason why you did these things in this order. Because one way you can look at being suspicious, in another perspective, it can be looked at as, well, it had to clean the apartment up sometime and it was already ruled a suicide. Are those elements that could be looked at in some sort of criminal way?
It's some evidence against the fiance, but will it win the day? Absolutely not, in my
Yeah.
opinion. They just don't have enough, based on my understanding of the investigation, to go forward now. They would have to do some follow up, and it's going to be hard to find people who the fiance talked to for those folks to remember those conversations in detail.
Mhm.
It's just a huge quagmire for literally everyone involved. It seems.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe the silver lining, if we're going to find it here, there might not be justice truly for Ellen Greenberg, but there may be for other cases. If we can get basically through the Supreme Court, those laws changed where the lower courts can hear these things. You don't end up with families just being denied that for decades when they're coming forward with legitimate evidence.
Sometimes the only positive outcome we can hope for is that the immediate folks suffer an injustice so future folks can get justice. So there is reform that takes place that will hopefully prevent these errors from happening again, and will empower victims' families to better seek justice on the behalf of their deceased loved one.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.